ang isip, saksi ng langit sa sigla ng aking daigdig. Kaibigan ko'y araw, hatid ay liwanag sa bawat nais marating. Ano nga bang taglay ng hangin, habagat ang hiwaga ng isang pangarap? Sa lakas ng ihip, ako ay napadpad, narating ang bughaw na ulap. Tinig ko'y lilipad, ang samyo ng hangin ay yakap at walang hahadlang. Sa hangad ng puso, tinig ko'y lilipad. Ang alon ng tubig na siyang aking himig, unti-unting naririnig. Habang mga talay sadyang bumubuhit, mga titik ng aking awit. Karamay ko ang buong kalawakan na umukit sa tamang daan. Buong tapang handang ako ay gabayan, abutin man ng kailanman. Tinig ko'y lilipad, ang samyo ng hangin ay yakap at walang hahadlan. Sa hangad ng puso, tinig ko'y lilipad. Maghihintay, di mapapagod sa paglalakbay. Makakamit ang tagumpay. Tinig ko'y lilipad, ang samyo ng hangin ay sa hangad ng puso. Tinig ko'y lilipad, samyo ng hangin at walang hahadlang. Tinig ko'y lilipad, ang samyo ng hangin ay yakap at walang hahadlang. Tinig ko'y lilipad, sa hangad ng puso. Tinig ko'y lilipad.
Then, tapos huwag mo na kainin yung yum burger. Mamayang gabi ko kakain midnight snack.
Good evening and welcome to the Philippine Olympic Committee's webinar. My name is Akiko Thompson Guevara, your moderator, and these webinars are being brought to you by the POC, the Olympic Solidarity, and the Philippine Olympians Association. Tonight we're going to be getting to know a new sport. It's not a new sport, but another sport that has been really
Akiko Guevara.
growing and showing so much
Siguro ano
promise
to,
in the
si
recent
Akiko
years.
Thompson.
So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guests for this evening. Our first guest is a former captain for the Philippine national women's team. She is currently the Secretary General for the Philippine Rugby Football Union and a member of the Asia Rugby Executive Committee. She chairs the Women's Advisory Committee that promotes the acceleration and visibility of women in rugby throughout Asia. She was also a member of the team that won bronze in the 2015 Southeast Asian Games, as well as silver in the recent 2019 Southeast Asian Games. She also serves on the Filipino Olympic Committee's Women in Sports Commission and was the first woman appointed to the World Rugby Council, rugby's highest decision-making body. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my dear friend, Miss Ada Milby. Hi, good to see you. Okay, our next guest for tonight, he's the good-looking and the newly appointed CEO of Philippine Rugby and the Philippine Volcanoes. Jake was a former team captain and played 12 years in the national program. He now looks over the direction of the union, focusing on grassroots development, domestic competitions, national teams, training and education, and the business operations for the union. Please welcome Mr. Jake Letts. Hey guys, so good to have you here, and so good to be learning more about your sport.
Well, we're happy to share more about it.
Yeah, well, how have you guys been? I mean, Ada, I know you're exercise and staying fit, but how's it been, this whole COVID pandemic?
It's been a challenge. I mean, I'm sure everyone that comes on this show is probably talking about the challenges of adjusting to finding what new normal looks like. I've got two daughters, and we're getting ready to go back into school, so figuring out how to be a full-time teacher as well as manage, my national team schedules and my work schedules and cooking schedules. So yeah, it's lots of juggling at the moment. So
Jake, you were asking me a while ago, how are you doing? I said to him, same. I don't know. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. I guess same as everybody else. Adapting to the new normal, adapting to the change in environment. It's definitely going to be a challenge for each and everyone. So for me personally, I'm doing okay. I'm pretty grateful for what I have. So overall, it's something that I'll look to maximise just to make sure that my health and my well-being is number one priority as well.
Yep. Good attitude, though. I'm curious, how has the rugby NSA, how have you guys, I'm sure everyone's having to do things differently, but what are some of the things that you, as an NSA, what are the changes, the adjustments that you're making on your training schedule, I mean, with your athletes?
Yeah, for us, it has been a challenge. I think we're different to other NSAs because, for starters, our athletes are not professionals. So, in terms of their career-wise, their lives there, it's going to be a little different to a full-time athlete. We do have full-time players based overseas, so they've been affected drastically there. But however, as an NSA and as a union, in terms of our training schedules, that's obviously been drastically affected. We're looking to adapt to the new normal, but also as an actual NSA, we actually employ up to 16 full-time staff members. So, and 9 of them are actually development coaches. So they're helping us grow the game nationwide. And that's probably been a challenge for us because obviously they can't teach the game. Schools are closed, clubs are closed, fields are closed. So that's probably been our biggest challenge in that sense. However, in terms of our athletes, Ada's an athlete, so I'm sure she can update in terms of how we're coping. But overall, what we've done is rugby is a team sport, so we've adapted a new strength and conditioning program for our athletes, especially for our women's program. A lot of our men's programs, a lot of our sort of top national players are based overseas. Some of them are already back playing, however others are still just training full time. So yeah, it's been quite a challenge.
Did you say some of them are already back playing?
Yeah, so we have some of the men's and women's players are based in Australia and New Zealand, so they're actually playing again because they're free of COVID, right? So community rugby is up and running in some countries, not only in Oceania, but I believe Korea's back playing again. So yeah, rugby is being played around the world, so it's just a matter of when we can get back on the field.
Yeah, I have several questions in my head. What are your 16 coaches? Are they just kind of in limbo right now? I mean, are you supporting them while in the meantime?
Yes, we haven't let anyone go in that sense. We've obviously got a financial assistance program in place. However, just in terms of managing their time, we obviously encourage them to look at additional income, just because we don't know how long this is going to go for. So, it's about making sure that they're safe, they're healthy, and also we're encouraging them to maximise this time with family, obviously, because in terms of rugby as a sport, out of 52 weeks a year, we're literally playing rugby about 48 of them. So, yeah.
Don't you guys need a break? My gosh.
He doesn't mean just national teams. We're talking about across all our programs, community rugby.
Okay, got it. There's stuff going on.
Organization pretty much 48 weeks out of the year, and I think it's really important as well. Obviously, family is number one at this stage. Making sure that our staff are able to support themselves is another, which is why we've encouraged them to look for other means. But we're also, Jake and I talk about this all the time. It's one of those things where sometimes you get so busy with the rugby, there are other things that you don't get to attend to as an organization. And so this has also been a really, really good time for us to sort of regroup and readapt and sort of look at what we're doing and how we can engage our staff, our community in this sort of online space. And so I think
Because you have the time, you kind of do have time for other things because you can't be on the field, right?
Right, so we can't be on the field, and all that time stuck in traffic is also immediately gone now as well. So we're really just trying to find ways to upskill our staff, keep them engaged, get them working on other things. As you know, we've got another project around safeguarding, and so we're finding other ways to keep our staff engaged besides just what does it look like to be a development officer or a development coach going out and delivering the game to kids.
Yeah.
So I think we've done pretty well adapting.
Yeah, sounds like it. Jake, you were saying that majority of all your athletes are not professionals, right? So does that mean that they are on their own, workout wise, and they have other jobs, other lives outside of being an athlete, and do you give them the leeway to stay in shape? Or you mentioned earlier that the women's have a strength and conditioning program that they're following, but in on the whole, are they kind of on their own?
Yeah, so the way national rugby programs work is usually before you actually have 3 seasons. So you have a pre-season, you have an in-season, and you have an off-season. So the way that works is for a national program, we usually get together in terms of selecting a national squad, selecting the players they're going to play about 16 weeks prior to an international competition. So what that involves is, for example, for the women right now, we've actually put in place, because a lot of our women's players are based in the country, so a lot of them are largely homegrown. So what we've done is we've created a COVID season. So what that means is, we talk to the girls around March or April. We actually held a forum.
Kahit pareho nung si Tito Jay nga, healer, ang lakas ng pawis eh. Healer ba yun?
Kasi na-upgrade yung mga emblems.
Ano ba yung emblem? Ano ba yun?
Na-upgrade kasi yun.
For example, for the women right now, time as an opportunity to really look at the program, discuss what are the positives, what are some of the improvements we can make. And what we got from that was that we knew that COVID was going to be, it's going to be different for each and every athlete. So what we've done is we've created a program specifically for these athletes. So we've got like a gym program. If you have access to a gym, there is a specific program for that. If you don't have access to a gym, there is a train at home program, which involves just body weights. It involves that type of exercise. And what we're doing is we put in place some key targets every month. So what we do is we have basically 3 stages or 3 blocks. Block 1, block 2, block 3. And it's a 3-month program. And what we're doing is encouraging the girls to obviously consider, your well-being, your health, obviously work. There is a program in place. Please do follow it. If you cannot follow it for whatever reasons, because of our monitoring system, we can sort of check in and say, hey, how's everything going? We see that you're not as training as much as the other girls. You know, do you need any more support there? So that's one side. So that's for the girls. For the guys, in terms of, we've basically got two sets of players. We've got a local group of players and an international group of players. So our local group of players are mostly training with their clubs. You'll find that the local rugby clubs have got their own sort of training programs. Yeah, which we encourage because overall, you know, the clubs have their own culture, they have their own systems, and we like to see that. And what we do with that is we promote those programs. And then from an international point of view, like I mentioned before, a lot of our players based overseas, they're actually already in season. They have their own club programs, so it's quite unique.
I imagine in a sport like rugby, you know, just the working together as a team, it's so critical. And I'm assuming that's why you said earlier there's a 16-week. So do you guys normally, like before a tournament, you'll select based on, you can pick from different clubs and just put them together?
Yeah, so in terms of a national program, it's obviously the best players available for the national team. So that comes from locally and abroad. So by how we select that is from a domestic competitions point of view. Our coaches and our players will be playing in the Philippines for their local clubs each Saturday. So obviously they're being assessed there. You know, our rugby community is quite small in terms of the competition. We have, you know, we play about I think it's around 23 or 24 weeks of rugby every Saturday. Then that's not including international season. So from there, our coaches will get an idea on how they're playing locally. And then from internationally, we also have obviously access to the internet now. We can watch games and our coaches can stay in touch with players based overseas. But overall, yeah, I think Ada's obviously part of the national program. She plays local rugby. She attends the local training sessions, and then we have a national training session as well. So it's kind of intertwined.
Yeah, Ada, are you? I mean, I heard earlier you're still competing. You're not coaching.
No, so I was the head coach in 2018, and then I realized I wasn't done yet. So
you still had something in you.
It wasn't quite time to hang up the boots, and yeah, I just really felt that I still had something to contribute to the team. And I think one of the things that I talk about all the time with, you know, with the management staff and with the players is that I want to be at the point where the program is so strong, or that I get so old. I'm not sure.
But so you're talking about the women's program.
The women's program, yeah. So I want to make, you know, as Jake said, we always want to have the best of the best. And so if I'm competing for these spots and I'm still able to make the spot the same as anybody else, that means that I can still contribute something. And the day that I don't make the cut because someone's better than me,
you're not needed.
It means that it's a good day, right? It means that the program is at a stage where it's beyond me, and that's really what we're aiming for in Philippine rugby.
Yes, that's right. I was kind of researching you guys, so correct me if I'm wrong. Rugby has been around since 1998, is that right?
In the Philippines?
In the Philippines.
Yeah, so it was actually around in, Ada, correct me if I'm wrong, it was really early, right? 1930s or something in the Philippines was the first.
Yeah. Right, it was like 1912 or 1913, something like that. It was originally being played by the Nomads. It was brought here by, you know, Americans and other foreigners. Yeah, and so they established that club way back. But it was at that time it was only being played by foreigners, so it wasn't really brought into the Philippine space of the environment and culture until 1998.
Yeah, okay. And then when did the women emerge? The women's team.
The women's program started in 2010.
And I'm kind of curious. I'm sure you've had a lot of experienced a lot of resistance in getting women to play the sport. I mean, how did you find your players, and what was it like for you?
Well, I think women's sport in general, I think you know as well as I do, having been involved in the women's sports space for quite some time. I think that it's a very socially driven hobby. So, a lot of girls, the way that we get more girls to come to the program is because they're invited.
Friends are there.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, hey, let's go do this thing together as friends, and that's how we sort of build it organically. We have had a couple of crossover athletes through recruitment drives, but those are really few and far between. I would say that the strength of our program is the friendships that have been built, and how we build more friendships by bringing, widening the circle by bringing more friends into the program. So it's a slowly growing program, but I would say it's a strong, steady growth.
Yeah, and I'm just curious, what is the general age range of your women?
We've got girls that are playing as young as 15 and 16 years old.
Wow.
In fact, really, really happy. We've got the Miriam College High School that have a program there. And of course, some of the international schools also have some girls playing touch rugby. And we've got some university age girls, but the majority of the girls are probably early 20s, mid 20s. You've got a couple of the outliers like me at the upper end.
That's good.
29 years old, upper end.
I was talking to Jake about that earlier, so. Okay, I'm kind of curious, growth-wise, where are you? Are you guys, men's, are you guys everywhere in the Philippines? I'm assuming the women's are only in Metro Manila. Oh.
No, we're all basically across. So we're across 13 regions. But in terms of the women's and the men's, no, we actually have women's in Cebu, we have women's in Davao. It's actually all across. It's because rugby is such an inclusive sport. You'll find that at any rate we're pretty similar in that sense. In terms of growth numbers, women's rugby is actually the highest grossing sport coming across in the new year, in the new generation. So
wait, say that again. Highest what?
It's actually one of the world's biggest growth areas. Is that correct, Dana?
Yeah. So globally, rugby for the last 2 years, there have been more women and girls playing rugby, new to the game, than boys for the last 2 years. So more women, more girls playing.
What do you attribute that to?
Sorry?
What do you attribute that to?
I think it's just that because rugby has done such a great job of promoting the profile of women and just showing more games, commercializing the game, that more girls are seeing models that they want to be like. So it's like, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so the fact that World Rugby are really doing a great job promoting more women's games. When I first came to the Philippines and started trying to find women's rugby games on YouTube, couldn't find, I'd have to really dig to find a couple of clips here and there of women's rugby. Now the games are being live streaming, they're being shown on regular television. So it's really a huge shift in how women's rugby has been portrayed and broadcast.
Ada, when you first came to the Philippines, was there women's rugby? Was women's rugby in existence already?
It had just started when I came. So
nice timing.
Yeah, exactly. So I came in at really the right time.
And how did you grow the sport in like Davao and Cebu? Because I know you kind of need like a seedling there to get other friends and everything.
I think one of the strengths of our NSA specifically is that we have so many female development officers, or so many female staff, and so that has really been a huge game changer for us in promoting getting more women and girls in the game. But of course, they've done a great job getting more boys and men as well. But it's been a huge turning point for us in making sure that we're promoting the women's game as well.
Jake, was that strategic to get more women as development officers?
Well, to be fair, they're so passionate, and they love the game, and their attitude towards training, towards coaching is really refreshing, because all it does is make our NSA better. So it really is, we have some fantastic women's coaches, some fantastic women's development officers, and to have that in our sport is nothing but a blessing. So but overall, in terms of how we promote both is really good. And as Ada said, World Rugby is doing a really good job, and not only that is like when we watch the women's play, it's really exciting because you start to, especially at the top level as well. Some of these girls that are playing at the top international level are amazing, and you wouldn't really get to watch that if they didn't promote it. So I think World Rugby's done a really good job there, along with Asia Rugby. So it encourages the girls in the Philippines to see this at the highest level. And that way they can compare themselves, they can be inspired, and they can perform at their best as well. And I really enjoy watching the women's series as well because to see them do what I was growing up, because I've been playing rugby since I was 6 years old, right? I never really used to watch girls rugby because it was pretty non-existent when I started playing. But to see it now and to see it in the Olympics and to see the girls doing a massive and great job, it's really good.
Did you say has it been in the Olympics a while already?
No, it's only just it came back in 2016.
So it was
It was an Olympic sport in 1920 or something like that. I can't remember. So and back then it was the 15s rugby format, and then they took it out because the time of recovery to be able to play from a 15s match to another 15s match was too long, and they couldn't fit it within the time frame of the Olympic schedule. So when sevens was reintroduced into the Olympic Games, it was a much better fit, and so it's fantastic. In fact, our boys, our men's team, just narrowly missed out on the Olympic opportunity in this for 2020.
Really? How many countries do they select from Asia?
So from Asia, because Japan are hosting it, it's actually 2. It's only ever 1. So, but now because it was in Tokyo, it was going to be 2 Asian teams, and then a repechage team actually has another opportunity. So
A wild card.
Yeah, a wild card. Yeah. So our men's team, they did quite well in the Olympic qualifications. We fell just short. However, it's encouraging us to see there. We've already qualified for the World Cup before, so for us that was huge. To be able to play in a Rugby World Cup for the men's program was a really, really fantastic achievement, and it's sort of it really kick-started our rise to Asia Rugby.
I have so many questions going in my head. Your teams, do you try to get a good mix of local, homegrown, and is there a percentage of locals that you want to keep on the team always?
So the way it's actually it's an interesting program, the way that we first started to grow Philippine rugby, because it was actually from, you could say, the top down. What that means is when rugby was first introduced into the Philippines as a national sport, it was predominantly played by expats. So we had some expats, they love the game of rugby, and they thought, look, why don't we get more Filipinos to play the game? So how they did that was they obviously had no local players at the time. This was around 2003, 2004 at that time. And then what they did was they actually started to recruit Filipinos based overseas, and I was one of the first. So me and my brother. So in order to get Philippine rugby off the ground, they needed to find some Philippine rugby players based outside of the country. And there is a lot. So what they did was they recruited a lot from overseas. They brought them back into the Philippines, and we competed under the Philippines because my mother's from the Philippines. All our mothers are from the Philippines. So what that did was it showed that Philippine rugby existed, and then what we did was through successful performances we showed we could play rugby, and then what that did was it created more and more interest. So it's now at a stage where our vision is to make sure that we get more and more homegrown national players, and the women's program is a testament to that, because they've sort of, in terms of their development, in terms of their level of international rugby, you'll find that the national team is basically, I guess, around 80% homegrown.
Wow. 80% locally trained rugby players,
Yeah, so Yeah, and for the men's, we're still at a stage where we're playing at a super high level. You know, we played at the World Cup, we're nearly qualified for the Olympics. So it's a little, the gap's still obviously very large, but what we've done is we've basically created 3 national programs. So we have a locally based national program, the top national players based here locally. And then we have the residence program, which are the best players in the Philippines living, whether you're an expat or you're a Filipino, you can play in that. And then we have obviously our national program, which is Filipino, so it's the best of the best. So, but overall, yeah, our goal is to be a generation where it's all locally home based, and I think we're on the right track. And you know, the women's program is a testament to that. The men's that is our vision. We want to get to a stage where we can obviously, because when you look at our local competition, there's some very good local players. You know, they may not have the size, but they're fearless, and they do compete at the highest level.
Did you say feelers?
Fearless.
Yeah, fearless. Sorry. Hey, I'm curious. Do the women? Is there Women's World Cup?
Yeah, well, they're not called the Women's World Cup. Actually, all our World Cups are just called World Cups. So there's a Rugby World Cup 2021, a Rugby World Cup 2020.
But are women included in the World Cup?
So they are on off years. So in 2021, next year, the World Cup for women will be played in New Zealand. And then the next Rugby World Cup 2023 will be played by the men in France.
I see. Okay, every 4 years. Got it. And do we have both 15s and 7s teams?
We do, yeah. So I would say in Asia, in general, most of the Asian countries are gravitating towards the 7 sport, obviously because it's an Olympic
Easier.
sport.
Oh.
Yeah, well, mostly because it's the Olympic sport, right?
Okay,
So
yeah.
as far as program funding, and also it's much easier as a crossover athlete to pick up the sport of 7. So if you're a sprinter, you're a basketballer, you're a footballer, it's much easier to cross over into the 7 sport because the contact is less, because the dimensions of the field are the same, but you have 15 players on a field, you only have 7. So it's basically sprinting. It's like sprinting and wrestling for 14 minutes straight. You're just running and getting tackled, running and getting tackled. So it's just this really intense, high-paced game that you're watching, or playing rather. And the 15s format is really, there's a lot more contact. There's a lot more specialized skills that are involved. And so the Asian programs in the Philippines are really doing a strong in the 7s. But we are looking to maintain the 15s. It is the traditional format, and as I like to say, 15s is the game for all, because it's the game that requires tall people, short people, big people, skinny people. I mean, people of all shapes and sizes in the 15-a-side game. Whereas the 7-a-side game, you're really looking for some of your faster folks to pick up the game.
Very interesting. Huh, I'm learning something new. Jake, you were kind of you're talking about the future plans. I'm just kind of getting further into that. What are the overall general plans for the Philippine? You know, this is such a tongue twister. Philippine rugby football. Why don't you just say Philippine rugby?
Yeah, it's actually
rugby, Kiko. People are gonna think we're talking about this rugby and not rugby football. So we've got a big job ahead of us. And so,
You gotta be kidding me.
I'm not kidding. I'm actually not kidding. You know, it is actually one of, I don't know if it's not an official Philippine rugby vision, but my personal vision for Philippine rugby is that when I walk up to somebody walking on the street and I say, "Do you know what rugby is?" They don't laugh in my face and say, "Oh, it's the kid that does, glue."
Well, if you say it like that, yeah, I get it.
Well, because one of the international campaigns was actually called "Get Into Rugby," which obviously didn't fit the context of the Philippines. So, so that's why we call it rugby football and not just the word rugby, because of that specific connotation. One day we hope that we can just say Philippine rugby and no one will know any different. But it's just the stage of development that we're at, unfortunately.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. I was just like, oh, it's such a tongue twister.
It is a tongue twister. It is definitely a tongue twister.
But so what are your plans and future plans for both the men's and women's program in the Philippines?
Yeah, so for us, at the end of 2018, we actually, as a union, put together a strategic planning weekend. So we actually got together all our stakeholders. That was athletes, that was coaches, it was sponsors, it was players, it was administrators. So we held it over 2 days. And what we did was we actually put together a roadmap over the next 4 years. So what was our plans in 2019, 2020, 2021 and 2022? So it's pretty common for obviously a lot of sports and a lot of associations strategic plans. However, from us, thanks to ADA, thanks to Asia Rugby and World Rugby, what we were able to do is we were able to get some moderators in and to teach us, what is our pathway looking forward. So overall, we identified 3 pillars, and that's perform is the first pillar, which is our national program. So we want to make sure that our national programs are performing at the highest level. And then the second one is invest. So our second pillar in invest is investing in grassroots rugby, investing in domestic rugby, and investing in training and education. And then lastly, our third pillar is connect. So we want to be able to connect with all stakeholders, whether that's new players, whether that's sponsors, whether that's media. We want to be able to sort of spread our game, spread the awareness. So overall, under each pillar, we actually have a set of tools, a set of points that we've listed. It's all on our website, and it's actually my job to make sure that we go through each of those pillars and sort of tick off every box. And it's safe to say, for the first sort of 12 months, because of the Southeast Asian Games, we were heavily focused on perform. So we wanted to make sure our national teams were performing at the highest levels. And 2019 for us and 2018 were very successful years for our national programs, both in women's and in men's, and in national youth teams as well. So we're now sort of into the area of invest, where we want to invest more into grassroots rugby, invest more into domestic competitions, and in training and education. So, but overall, it's really a point-by-point plan, and it really outlines our next 4 years, because it has our vision in there, it has our mission in there, it has our values in there, and overall, it's something like a blueprint. So if we can look back, after 2023 and look back at this plan and see if we've ticked all these boxes, we should be at a better place.
That's awesome. I don't know if many NSAs are as strategic as you guys are doing, but it's so refreshing to see. And I'm sure, Ada, you're being at the Asian, what's the Asian Rugby Committee? Is it called the Asian?
Yeah,
Rugby?
she's I'll speak for Ada here. She is, honestly, she's really helped the direction in terms of our union. Her being exposed to the Asia Rugby Exco, which is the executive committee. She's the only female on that, and then her being appointed to the World Rugby Council as the first female to that is really good for us, because she's exposed to the highest levels of governance and administration, and then
access,
exactly. And luckily for me, she's able to pass on this type of knowledge, pass on these type of strategic plans, and we can make Philippine rugby better.
Ada, how'd you do it, Superwoman? I'm sure you needed a lot of support from the men, but it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that there's no single person that can ever claim a victory for themselves, right? And really, I think for me, it's just, I've always just been really passionate about what I want to do and how I want to contribute both to not just women's rugby, but to Philippine rugby. And I think it's that passion that sort of got me noticed at the Asia rugby level, and then they just said, hey, look, we need someone to step up there. And then sort of every step, the step just in front of me always just appeared at the right time, and I was in the right place to be able to take it on and just say, yes, I want to step up into this and have a go. So
I have a feeling, Ada, you're going to be overwhelmed with the amount of work outside, and I think that's what's going to ease you out as an athlete at one point, but I don't know. I mean, don't listen to me.
You're absolutely right. I mean, trying to manage and balance all the different hats. Jake and I actually talk about this quite often. You know, it's when we have discussions at sort of a team management level, it's like, which hat am I wearing right now? Am I wearing the second hat? Am I wearing a management advisor hat? Am I wearing an athlete hat? And so trying to sort of compartmentalize and segment out the different parts of my life has, it does have its challenges. But I think overall, Jake would agree that these external experiences actually enrich the feedback that I can give to Philippine rugby, enrich the feedback that I can give to the various programs that I can speak to.
Yeah, I should get to some of the questions soon, but I'm kind of curious. I know you said in the last 2 years, women's rugby worldwide has really been on the up and up. In Asia, I mean, are all the Southeast Asian countries playing rugby? Were they involved in the Southeast Asian Games?
So a good portion of them are. I think that 6 came and competed in the 2019 SEA Games here in the Philippines.
Not bad.
So 6 is great. Vietnam are in the state, like they're in the beginning stages, but they haven't quite got their NSA formed yet. But they do have rugby happening by both boys and girls, men and women. Cambodia, who didn't participate in the last SEA Games for rugby, but they do actually have a rugby program and they have an NSA. So we're hoping to see them come back either in the 2021 SEA Games or the 2023, which Cambodia is hosting. So that would be great. Who else? Brunei have a team as well, but they didn't send either team. And I don't know, Jake, help me out here.
Who came in first? I'm curious. Was it Singapore at the last Southeast Asian Games?
In 2019,
Yeah.
for the women, it was Thailand. Just narrowly. Thailand beat us out, yeah. And of course, the men got gold, so.
Ah, of course, the men got gold. I'm kind of curious. Do men and women not spar, but do they train together?
We call them like scrag games. So every once in a while, we'll have not full contact games, but we'll have we call it scrag, where you kind of you'll like wrap up your opponent, but you won't take them to the ground. So you still get a little bit of the contact interaction, but you still have to think on your feet defensively and an attack, and you're playing against each other. So we play some fun games like that, but we don't play full contact against each other.
Yeah, and is rugby like basketball in that you have like a point guard or someone who's passing it to the whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. In the 15s format, you've sort of got that very specialized technical person in each different role. In 7s rugby, it's a lot more flexible. So everybody might be able to pass the ball off the ground. Everybody's got to be able to pass the ball 10 meters. Everybody's got to be able to defend. Everybody has to be able to tackle somebody that's broken away in the line. So it's a much more flexible game in 7s where everyone kind of has to be able to do everything.
Okay. I think I should start getting to some of these questions here. There's one question here. Any advice for the current and aspiring rugby athletes?
Yeah, I think for obviously for the current athletes in this environment, where we're obviously promoting, we've got to stay positive. It's going through a situation and a time where it's a little unpredictable, especially with rugby in the Philippines. A lot of questions I get asked is when is rugby going to return? So for our current athletes, it's about staying strong, staying positive, and staying engaged, maximising this opportunity. Whether it's through training and education. That's one of the most amazing things I've seen through this pandemic is the amount of resources on training and education online now, especially from all these resources around the world has been really good. So I actually watch a lot of the coaching drills, I watch a lot of the tutorials, and then we pass it on to our coaches here. And you'll find that the sort of the top tier nations, such as New Zealand, such as England, such as Australia, they put together a lot of webinars, a lot of coaching tutorials, and we now use those as resources. So
you're generous about,
Yeah, of course, and it's something that we can maximise in times like this. But in terms of aspiring rugby players, obviously we're looking to grow our games as much as possible. And as Ada said, we've got programs that fits all body types, and we diversify in terms of every type of skill level. We've actually split our leagues as well, so we've actually got a developmental league and a sort of an open league. So there is stages of where you can learn rugby and where you can build up your skills, build up your confidence to get involved. So overall, there is a pathway for it. It doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how young you are. There is a pathway for you. So overall, we promote that, and it's really about community engagement. And I think, as Philippine rugby, and as from my experiences, watching rugby grow, it's about, rugby for us is like a family. We want to make sure that we're encouraging, healthy, active lifestyles. We want people to be outside. We want people to enjoy the sun, enjoy the wet. It doesn't really matter, but we want people to enjoy the community.
Yeah.
Because overall, you'll find that rugby is an escape for a lot of people. It's about playing with friends, being coached by, some really experienced people, and learning, and having a love for learning as well.
Yeah. I'm curious, where do you guys typically train when you're able to train on field? And what is the size of your? Sorry, this is such a naive question, but what is the size of your field, and where do you play typically?
Yeah, I'll let Ada answer that. Ada?
Well, we don't have a national home, as it were. Our clubs play at various fields throughout the Metro Manila. There's not that many of them, so there's the McKinley. What's it called, Jake? The McKinley.
McKinley Hill Stadium.
McKinley Hill Stadium. Sometimes there's training at the international, like the British School in Manila and the International School Manila have both been really great about opening up their fields to the national programs. There are clubs who train in Merville at the Club United, formerly known as Nomads, as far as down south as the racetrack in Carmona, Blue Pitch in Makati. So, and even as small a pitch for training areas as the Oval on 26th Street in BGC. So, I mean, really, the size of the field is a little bit smaller than a football field. It's about 100 meters by 65 meters width. So it's a little bit more narrow than a football or a soccer pitch. But when it comes to training, really the stage of development that we're at in rugby, we just find an open space with some green grass, and it doesn't even have to have a lot of grass, just a little bit of grass. And we're willing to go out and pass all around.
But Ada, some of the places you're saying, I know that it's turf. It's that's not a problem. I mean, you're sliding. That's kind of painful, eh?
Yeah, so it depends, right? It just depends on the type of turf. So at the International School Manila, we're able to do full contact. At the British School Manila, we do usually modified contact. So not all of our trainings involve full contact. I mean, I think when people think of rugby, they're just thinking about people just like slamming each other to the ground all the time. There's a lot more skill and ability involved in rugby besides just this big hit and collision. There's passing, there's catching, there's strategy, there's decision making, there's all these things. Tackling is just really one part of the whole game.
Yeah. No, I'm sure. That's not what I'm saying. I'm actually kind of. I'm kind of curious how you guys got into the sport. But let me get through these questions first, so at least I know they're addressed. Okay, for Ada, how do you describe the growth of rugby in the country in terms of popularity and medal victories?
All right. So shout out to Gab Ferreras for that question. Thank you. Really, I wish I could tell you that that the number of medals that we have could mirror the popularity and the growth of the game. We actually got into, I think it was in 2013, Jake, where Philippines hadn't been in a World Cup of any sport in something like 50 years, and rugby was the first sport to enter a World Cup to break the 50-year spell. We got this kind of little article in the newspapers, and then a couple months later, basketball then obviously made it. The Gilas made it to the World Cup, and it was this huge thing. And then all of a sudden, everybody forgot that that rugby actually were the ones that broke that spell. And so, as a team sport, we're really, really successful. We're performing really well, and I think probably what some of the gaps for us is that we're not commercialized here in the Philippines. We're not a televised sport. Our local leagues aren't televised, so we don't have a professional league. And I think that will go a huge way. One of the ways that we can increase the popularity is by finding
visibility.
Is that visibility. So either getting our domestic leagues put on television, or finding a way to create a professional league where we can televise our games. The other way that we're looking at how we can increase the popularity is, of course, strong partnerships with LGUs and schools, deaf eds, really trying to see how can we get rugby into the local community and into the schools. We know that that's a huge part of how we can also increase popularity of rugby.
Yeah. I'm just curious, how many teams do you have in the domestic league?
In Metro Manila, I think Jake's probably best place to put this. I think we have 15 in Metro Manila, and then we have a couple of teams that are scattered throughout the provinces. So we have a team in CDO, we have a team in Davao, there's a team in Cebu, a team in Palawan, Albay, Bulacan, Clark. So we have teams that are kind of scattered all over, but the majority of the teams play in the Metro Manila League, or we call it the Luzon League.
Yeah. And Jake, were you part of the World Cup team?
Yeah, I was.
Wow. What was that like?
Oh, for me, it was a dream come true because honestly, like to play at a World Cup, I never believed that or ever thought that I could ever be at that level. I guess I grew up in Australia playing all my rugby, and the highest level I got to was basically one level before Australia. The highest I ever went to was New South Wales, which is like there's still quite a huge jump to be able to jump to Australia. And so when I first got recruited, when I was 17, I believe, when they asked me to play for the Philippines, of course I jumped at the opportunity because, for one, I obviously was very proud that to be Filipino, obviously to represent my mum more so than my dad, I guess, especially being in sport. So she was super proud of that. But I guess playing in a World Cup, it was unbelievable because we were competing against the best teams in the world. You know, we were staying at the same hotel, and we deserved to be there. I think it took us about 3 or 4 years to get there. And when the national team actually qualified in 2012, I was actually not part of that squad. I was actually in Japan at the time, so I couldn't play. And when I was watching them, when I heard the news, I actually couldn't watch the live stream. Me and my brother were super excited. And then the following year, thankfully I got invited to the training camp and I was selected in the 12. But overall, you know, we had a great coaching staff, we had a great training camp, and our board at the time and all our sponsors at the time were, you know, very positive. Us making that competition, it was a really unbelievable experience.
I imagine it's like the Olympics of, you know, for the sport. Was your brother also a rugby player?
Yes, he was. He was very good. He was actually the former national captain as well. So I basically grew up playing rugby with him. So he was my model citizen in terms of how to play rugby. He was a very good player.
His brother was a very, very good rugby player. No diss against EJ. His brother was amazing.
Really?
He was he was a leader. Like he was very good, and I was lucky enough to play under him and play alongside him. And that's probably one of the most special reasons to play for the Philippines is that back in Australia, I only played ever with him once, I think in one game. However, for the Philippines, I think we played at least 20 times together, 25 times, something like that.
How awesome is that? Even for your parents to watch both children. Okay, there's another question here. Jake, how is your experience working with some of the best athletes in the country, like Hidlin, Nico, among others, in the Athletes Commission, POC Athletes Commission?
Yeah, for me, personally, it's been a really good experience. I've really enjoyed it. I actually spoke to Nico and Cheska last year, and they approached me saying, would I be interested, because obviously being an athlete and having some experience, obviously, with the union, it was going to help the commission. And I really enjoy it because it's a really good mix of people. You know, there's 7 of us on the commission, and we've obviously got Heidi there, we've got Nestle there. They're both in Olympic contention, so you know we try to give them as much space as possible. But in saying that, you know, Butch as well, they're all very active, so it's good to see. But you know, Nico's very passionate. You know, I love the way that he leads the group. Cheska is amazing. She's really smart, and I really enjoy working with her. Same with Jessie as well from swimming. Like, all of them are fantastic.
How are the roles distributed? Or did you discuss this, or did it just naturally, you know, one volunteered to take care of this and the other volunteered?
Yeah, I think for us it's more so basically with Nico and Cheska, they're the most experienced on the commission. And then, you know, you have me, Butch, Jesse, obviously there as well, that are sort of coming in from different angles and offering advice, offering different perspectives. And then you've got Nestle and Heidi as well, who also come in and offer their thoughts as well. But in terms of the way it's structured, I guess what I bring to the commission is a bit of governance, a bit of administration, especially through my experience with the union, because I've been exposed. I've got a very good board of directors. I've got a very good platform of where I learn how to run a union, how to run an organisation. So with that experience, I tend to bring to the commission. So that obviously allows the commission to operate like a small business. Now we've got balance sheets, we've got budgets, we've got set meetings, we've got agendas.
Wow.
We've got certain levels of expectations where everyone's contributing, and overall, it's a volunteer organisation, and we need to respect that. So, Heidi and Nestle is still training, so obviously, we let them do their training, and whenever they can respond, and they choose to a lot, to be fair, it's obviously really good. But overall, in terms of a balance, it's been really good.
Yeah, it's been fun working with you guys too. I mean, when I say the Philippine Olympians Association. Okay, there's another question here. Is there any discussions with the PSC and other concerned agencies regarding the possible resumption ng mga training ng volcanoes during the quarantine period? Is there any developments, I guess?
Development might be a bit of an overstatement. We have submitted plans to IATF, to PSC, POC, essentially finding a way to modify our game to make it as safe as possible. Insofar as much as we've even said, look, we just want to get on the field together. We won't touch. We will have our own ball. We won't have any contact with each other. We won't even pass. We just want to be able to get on the field and do some conditioning drills together. So that's sort of the phase one. And each phase of the progression is, making sure we've got all the different hygiene things in place, body temp, all that stuff, contact tracing, and following sort of the guidelines of Department of Health and IATF to be able to resume safely essentially we've modified our game to the point where it's really no different than going out and playing tennis or going out for a jog or going out for a bike ride. Really, any of the other sports that have already been approved, we've modified it to fit those safety guidelines. But we unfortunately haven't had any response yet. I know that the POC, I think that the POC is speaking to try with IATF just to try and get Olympic bound athletes back to training. So we're hoping that once that can get approved, or once those conversations develop, that we can see how we can get other national teams back to training. So we may not be able to resume community rugby or our club training immediately, but if we can at least get our volcanoes, men's and women's, back to training, that helps a lot in the preparation for not only 2021 SEA Games, but also the 2022 Asian Games, which is a huge target for us.
Yeah, so that's the next big event. Those are the next big events for you: 2021 SEA Games and 2022
Asian Games. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that other countries have done it as well in terms of returning to play. So World Rugby actually sent out some return to play guidelines, and countries such as Australia, such as New Zealand, such as England, they all followed the same steps that we are proposing, because initially they weren't allowed to do contact training at the start as well. So overall, there is a specific set of guidelines that we've been obviously advised on, saying these are safe if you're in this level of quarantine. This is okay. There's no contact. When you move out of that level of quarantine, you can obviously take a certain phase to be able to return to play. So overall, rugby as a sport, there has been some specific guidelines that are in place, and we're trying to ensure that, look, we're following these guidelines because it has been done in the past, and hopefully we get the green ticket.
Yeah. I know. Almost a whole year.
I know. But really, it's not just rugby that's suffering, right? We know all the sports are suffering, and
we're all in this.
We can only pray that all the sports can get back to training sooner than later.
Yeah, so true. Guys, you guys have any last parting words you guys want to say before we sign off?
Well, I suppose, if this has had any interest to you, please make sure you check out our Facebook, our social media, our Instagram. follow us. You know, we do have some engagements there. Every once in a while, we'll do some workouts and other great things. So please become a fan of rugby, even if you don't get the opportunity to try it yet. And then once all this COVID stuff is lifted and we're able to get back to training, please come out and give rugby a try. I promise you, you'll either love it or you'll realize that you want to be a fan of it for the rest of your life. So
Yeah, you guys said any shape, size, what age.
Same age. We're all welcome. You're all welcome. So please come out and you know, give us a go.
Truly inclusive.
Very.
Very true. Yeah, first and foremost, we'd like to thank, obviously, everyone involved in rugby, especially in the Philippines. They know who they are. We've had an immense amount of support, immense amount of resources poured into the development of rugby in the Philippines. We thank everybody for that, past and present, and to any future fans and spectators and participants, yeah, please do get involved. You can follow us at Philippine Rugby, both on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please do visit our website. You know, all the information's there, and as Ada said, get into rugby.
And Akiko, of course, thank you so much to Philippine Olympic Committee for hosting us tonight and having us on the air and allowing us to share a little bit more about rugby with and also with the wider Philippine community.
It's been so educational for me, and I mean, there are more questions that I could ask, but then I'm kind of like, maybe at another time.
Next time.
Yeah, but thank you so much for being with us tonight, and thank you all for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Maraming salamat. Magandang gabi. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Jacob, punch them! Punch! Good! Nice one, Jacob. Go back.
Nice one, Minion.
Mm-hmm.
Nice one, Lord. That's
Oh, we
translate
already have 37 stocks.
What's the
Yeah, that's 37 stocks.
20 seconds.
level now? Oh, that guy is level 50. Oh my god, that is the quickest Maven I never seen. Oh no, oh no, oh no.